Steven Pressley's extraordinary playing career saw him play for the likes of Rangers, Celtic and Hearts and win over 30 Scotland caps. He won titles at Ibrox and Parkhead and won the Scottish Cup with 3 separate clubs. I'm Derek McGregor and this is One on One, and Steven would become a highly experienced coach and manager and of course is currently battling to keep Dundee in the Premiership. Steven provides an exceptional insight into how he battled demons as a player and also how he has developed in the management side. Steven, lovely day in Dundee. Appreciate you making the time. How's things?
Good, thank you. Yes, good. We're obviously on the back of a disappointing result at the weekend, but certainly not a disappointing performance. You know, I went on record as saying after the game it was potentially our best performance of the season, and you know, in reflection and looking at statistics, it very much was that. So, although you know, since beating St Mirren, we've lost the last 2 games with a really good performance at Celtic Park, and we followed that up with, as I've said, a really positive performance. But we need to now get the points.
It's been a season of extremes in terms of results and performances. That must be especially frustrating, even for somebody as experienced as yourself, Steven. Yeah,
it's been a real challenge, probably more challenging than I ever envisaged. In the early part of the season, we didn't have the nucleus of our squad. We had to find a way of playing and find a way to try and get some form of results. We played a lot more pragmatic than we are playing at present. And then slowly but surely since the early games, we've tried to become a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more fluid in our play and a little bit more offensive. And it's been challenging to get to that point, but slowly but surely we're seeing good signs.
I mean, as I was referring to there, extreme in results. Your first 2 games as manager, you lose to Airdrie, you lose to Alloa, and it's like, oh my word, this could be difficult. But yeah. Then you play excellently at Ibrox. You'll probably argue you should have won that game. You've ended up having to deal with a draw. You beat Celtic very well.
Yeah.
But then there's the flip side. There's a run of defeats and performances, and that must be very difficult to try and come to terms with.
It is, because unfortunately in football these days, you know, there's very little context and understanding. You know, whether you're a Dundee supporter or whether you're a Rangers supporter, you go to every game expecting your team to win, and that's the harsh reality of it, regardless of the resource of the club. You know, in recent weeks we've played a lot of difficult games and performed reasonably well in them, but people only look at the results, and that's the reality of modern day football, and I understand that. But part of my job is also to manage the group and manage a little bit more objectively, and what I mean by that is that we assess performances, we look at a lot of the data, we look at a lot of the statistics that we gauge our performances by, and we look at the trends of that, and we're moving in the right direction. It's difficult to convince people without getting consistent results, but hopefully with improved performances we can start to see that. But I'll be honest with you, it's been a real challenge. The other thing, from my own perspective, it's been difficult to adapt again. You know, going from a player where you're used to the pressures of football and then into management where it's almost a continuation, and for 7 or 8 years as a manager dealing with those pressures, and then coming out of the firing line for 5.5 years nearly, and enjoying my life without the pressures of what football management brings, but also the pressures of what a player brings, and then going back in. And I had to adapt again. I had to almost get used to the pressures of football, what it's like again, and try to normalise that again. And the adaptation's difficult, trust me. It really is. It's like everything. You know, once you're not doing it on a regular basis, it doesn't become normal, and that's the same with football management. So there's been a lot of adaptation for myself as well as a leader, and you know, it's been challenging, but I've enjoyed the challenge.
I mean, it was incredibly difficult for you here before a ball was even kicked. I mean, there wasn't exactly a fanfare for you, Stephen. I hope I'm not upsetting you by saying that, but I mean, I don't think the Dundee fans they weren't exactly ecstatic with your appointment,
No.
Stephen. And then, of course, you've come out with one of the best quotes of the season. You know, if you're looking for a manager with a history of winning titles, I'm not your man. And as an outsider, I'm thinking that's not helped his cause. And it was like petrol in the flames with the Dundee fans. But on the other side of it, it was searingly honest, Stephen. It was just what it was.
Yeah.
But how were you taken aback by the reaction to that? There was almost like a negativity towards you when you came in. Did that hurt?
Derek, if truth be told, I'd gone on holiday after it had been announced, and I don't at all use social media. I never look at social media. So I actually came here completely unaware, and obviously prior to being announced, I was briefed on the situation. But, you know, the one thing about me, and I've always prided myself on this, is my honesty. You know, and I was very honest in my appraisal of me as a head coach. You know, I obviously had the success with Falkirk and winning the Challenge Cup, but I've never had success in terms of winning titles and on a regular basis. You know, a lot of my success has come in the development of teams and the development of individuals within those teams. So I was just being brutally honest, you know, and I think it's something that I've prided myself on. I'm that with my players. I'm very honest with my players. I communicate with my players, and I think it's the only way I can be.
There was almost a feeling that it was, while it was factually correct, but it was also a feeling it was setting the wrong tone. On reflection, would you have said something different, or is it something you stand by and it is what it was, you know, or you know, it is what it is, you know?
I genuinely stand by it. You know, when I took the Falkirk job, you know, I insisted we were going to stay up, and I was criticised for that. But the truth is, when I went down to England, I went down with an enormous ego. I went down there thinking that I was going to be the next big manager. And I took some harsh hits while I was down there. I've really enjoyed my education down there. But, you know, I'm 52 now. I've been in football for 35 years. I've had to go through the mill. And it really moulds and shapes you and makes you understanding. It's made me a much, much better human being. And as a result of that, I was only telling the truth. And that's all I would ask for any individual. It's just telling the truth. So my honesty at times may, you know, upset people, but it's how I am as an individual.
How have the Dundee fans been with you in general this season, Stephen? Have you got a sense of it if you've been out in the city, or, you know, if fans, you know, try to be as supportive as possible to you?
Whenever I've met them in the street, they've always been extremely positive and very friendly towards myself. But I'm aware that until we start winning games and improving our league position, there's going to be a lot of negativity towards myself, and that's the harsh reality of football management. But I'm one that I just completed my degree in strategic leadership there in the summer, and I was at a football club that is obsessed with strategy and process, and I genuinely believe in the process. But to get to where you need to get to, there always is suffering, there always is difficulty, and there always needs to be perseverance. And it's tough just now. I know it is. It's tough for me, it's tough for the players, it's tough for so many people, our supporters. But we do believe that we're moving in the right direction. But equally, I'm aware that I need to get certain results.
Do you think the initial reaction to your appointment was also an element of your Dundee United background?
I would imagine so. There's always that element up here. You know, I think even as a player, wherever I went, I wasn't the most popular signing, to be perfectly honest. You know, and
Why do you think that was?
I think because I played in a certain manner. I wore a certain costume on a Saturday afternoon. I was plagued with huge insecurities as a player. You know, people had this image and persona of what I was. It wasn't what I was. But I put a costume on a Saturday afternoon. I had to behave in a certain way to get the performances out of myself. Being a football player is honestly hugely challenging. It's a really tough occupation, and as a result of that, I had to behave in a certain way. and people believed that that was who I was. It wasn't who I was.
So what was your real self, and what did you have to become?
My real self was huge self-doubt, huge insecurities. But on a Saturday afternoon, I became this leader. I became this person, warrior that pumped his chest out, that tried to intimidate people. That's what I became, and it wasn't me. But then people often judge you by how you are on the football field. It's a little bit like Scott Brown. I used to travel with Scott to train every day. Scott's a wonderful human being, but people don't see that side of him. And also during my era, it was an era where you couldn't show any cracks in your armour. You couldn't show your vulnerability. That wasn't the era that I was brought up in.
That was perceived as weakness.
That was perceived as weakness. Well, we're now in a different era where you can express yourself more. And that's the harsh reality of me as a football player. Nobody would have imagined that to be the case. I remember speaking to Christian Norgard at Brentford, and Christian had come out and talked about his difficulties while being on international duty in sleeping. And he told me that once he spoke about that publicly, the amount of players that came forward and made contact with him, because equally they had found it difficult. I played for Scotland some days on 2 hours sleep, just because I was so far out my comfort zone. It was difficult.
Was that anxiety?
Anxiety.
Was it just riddled with insecurities?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I always looked upon, and I still do, that I faced my insecurities, I faced my fears, and I always look upon that as the win, that I never ran from it. I've always been one to confront it and to keep going against what my mind's telling me. And that's what I look upon as the win. The insecurities, we're all plagued with those. But it's keeping on going back and facing those insecurities. And I'm okay to talk about it now.
So that was you as a player, but as a manager, do you feel you're more your true self now? You don't try to be someone you're not? To create an appearance or to create an image? No?
Not at all. And that's, I openly speak to my players about certain aspects. I don't pretend what I'm not. You know, I feel much more comfortable in my own body now. But it's been 35 years of a lot of learning, a lot of difficulties, a lot of facing the demons. And now I'm in a much better place. But I also can relate to the younger players, the players of today who are going through the same anxieties, the same difficulties that I faced.
Did you not worry as a player that people would see you, this persona you were trying to put across, people would see that as you being a fraud, you're not authentic? Did anyone ever say to you, we know that's not you?
No, no.
So that's how well you were convincing people?
Absolutely, yes.
And yet you're leaving games or you're leaving grounds and it's like,
absolutely.
Right, I'm back to myself.
Absolutely. And in the end, I would say to you that one of my regrets is finishing my career at 35. But see, on the other hand, I was tired. I was tired of facing my demons. I was tired of those challenges every week to keep going, even with that experience and that time behind me. And
was that your entire playing career?
Entire playing career. It was tough.
I mean,
but as I've said, I'm much more. And when you made reference to me talking and saying to people that I'm not your man if you're looking for titles, I was just being honest. And that's where I am in my life now. I'm very comfortable in my body. I'm much more happy with myself. And as a result of that, I'm comfortable in saying those things.
I must admit, from a reporter point of view, Stephen, I was stunned when you said that. For a start, it's not the norm for a manager to come first day in the job, and it almost felt like it was the wrong tone and it was like a downer. You were strictly speaking factually, but you know, I admire the fact that you thought, I'm going to say that, I'm experienced enough and I'm going to be true to myself, that's how it is. You weren't actually saying anything that was designed just for effect.
Nothing.
You know, or to create a false...
Absolutely, false narrative, not at all. It was just an honest appraisal. I was just being completely truthful on myself, and as a result of it, of course you're going to be critiqued, you're going to be criticised for those elements, but as I said, I was really comfortable in it, and it's how I am just now. I'm very comfortable in my own body. You know,
Do you feel this is the most authentic you've been in your football life? In a way?
without doubt. And it's just through age, through experience. You know, I have an amazing family. I've been married 25 years. I have 2 kids. And when people talk about success, I talk about the success in my life is that my 2 kids, I speak to them every day on the phone. They want to meet their father for a coffee. They want to go out for a drink with their father. That for me now is success. And I genuinely mean that. I've had a lot of stresses, a lot of difficulties in football, and I've faced the demon many, many times, and I'm very comfortable in my own body now.
Demon's quite a strong word. I mean, at the time, did you ever need help dealing with that?
I did actually, yeah.
Was it therapy? Was it a...
Yeah, I went to a sports psychologist on a number of occasions, but there wasn't the education around it at that time. And there's so much support within football clubs now, especially when you go down to England, you see the support mechanisms within the Premier League football clubs. But it wasn't seen in that way. And also, Derek, I said to you before, you didn't want to show your weakness during that era.
I was going to say, that must have been such a secret for you, Stephen.
Of course it was.
That is something you would not have want others in the dressing room finding out.
Absolutely.
Did you confide in anyone at that particular time?
Not at all, because it was seen as a weakness. I was meant to be the leader. I was meant to be that strong character that everybody came to.
That was entirely the image we had of you as a player.
Of course.
You know, the tub-thumping centre half.
Without doubt.
You know, all action, unflinching.
Yeah.
And yet no one knew behind the scenes.
No, but I always seen the strength as being able to face it continuously, those self-doubts. You know, and I think we have to understand that we're all plagued with insecurities, but I think the strength to continuously face those insecurities, and that's what I tried to do.
Was it a huge concern that someone would find out in the dressing room?
No.
At that particular time, did you worry that your whole reputation or your image, if what you were telling me became knowledge?
No, it wasn't a concern. It just wasn't the done thing at that time.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, life and the world has changed considerably since then, and people are much more relaxed about talking about these things, and that's the reality of it.
As a coach and a manager, have you, over the years, actually helped players who have maybe had similar issues to what you had in your career, and you've been able to speak to them with qualification? Have you come across players with those same insecurities yourself?
Without doubt. You know, I think that most of the players have real self-doubt and real insecurities. I think it's a normal part of it. I think we're fighting against it as players all the time.
Of course, you had 4 years as head of individual development at Brentford.
Yeah.
So that would have come into that kind of brief in your job?
Absolutely. And it was a really holistic approach we had there. We're overseeing the players, all aspects of their development, but also, you know, I got close to the players, and I also understood a lot of the time what the players were going through from my own experiences. So that allowed me to create some quite unique relationships with the players where they really trusted me.
Would they often confide in you on elements that they would simply not speak to anyone else about, maybe even family? Would they come to you for support, understanding, or just be able to talk to somebody? Was that part of it?
Yeah, and when I actually left the role, some of the messages that I received around that, you know, made me cry. And that's the truth. They were such deep and unique messages because I'd built such strong relationships with certain individuals. Just because of that fact that I supported them and helped them on the journey, I almost became a father figure to
And
many
we're talking
of them.
first team down, every player basically there. You were there to...
No,
or was it a certain level?
The role was that I really overseen our investment players that were our young players in our first team squad, or our investment B team players that were transitioning into our first team. So I overseen all of their development. And it was a really rewarding role. It was a role that I learned so much in, but equally I was able to build relationships with players, and quite unique. And you've got to remember that the ability to build the relationships far easier for myself, because I don't need to leave these players out. I don't need to drop them, my whole role was about supporting these players. It's much easier to do that than when you're a manager. Of course, I've tried to bring many aspects of that to my management, but I still have to leave players out.
Players, of course, the minute you got the job, players inevitably are looking into your background. They may feel they already know you, but they dig deeper and see your depth of experience. Have you had players come to you, confide in you with things, you know, that you may not have been aware of that could be affecting performance?
I always encourage it. You know, I'm always speaking to players. You know, of course I chat to them about football, but I chat to them also about their life and how things are away from football, because it's a huge part of their performance. So I try to create close bonds with the players here. And also, one of the things, as I said to you at the start, about honesty, you know, one of the things that I will always do, whenever I leave a player out, I will always bring them into my office and explain my decision making, because that's the type of relationships that I want in the club. I have to let them down, but I'll always confront it. I'll always be honest with the player, and that's the culture that I want within my club.
That's interesting you say that, Stephen. About a year ago, I interviewed Derek McInnes for our one-on-one series, and Derek said he always wants to be close with his players. He's not one of these managers that wants to keep a distance. There may obviously still be certain occasions you do maybe keep a little bit of a distance, but he felt it was important to have really close relationships.
Yeah.
So he could know them better, understand them better, and as such, you know, hopefully get more out of them. You obviously feel the same.
I do feel the same. I really do, and management's changed a great deal. You know, I was brought up again in the era where, you know, managers ruled by fear. That's not the case anymore. You know, you have to have relationships. They don't respond to that. But the one thing I'll say, Derek, is that people have said, you know, you can't, you know, speak to the kids of today like you used to. That's very true, but they still want honesty. They still want straightness. They still want directness. They just want it in a different way. They don't want it in the way that I experienced, where it was in front of everybody. You were singled out. Now it's about doing it in a different way. It's about speaking to them on a more individual basis, but by being pretty frank and honest with them about their performances and things they need to improve on. So they want that. They just, as I've said, they want it in a different way.
How it's communicated.
How it's communicated,
Yeah.
differently communicated.
I mean, you were almost 6 years away from a hot seat when you came into Dundee, and when you took the job here, how different a person or a manager do you think you were from what your previous position had been, Carlisle United?
Yeah.
How much do you think you changed in your thinking over that period away from being a manager?
Well, I think that it's interesting. I'd even changed when I went to Carlisle, but I was quite an aggressive, pace-setting type of manager in my younger days. I still always communicated, and I felt built good relationships with players. But, you know, I probably, especially around my staff, I probably didn't give them enough autonomy at the time. You know, I wanted to be the best. I wanted to reach the very top in football management, and nobody was going to stop me. So it was a kind of pace-setting style of leadership, and it's a tiresome style of leadership. And I'm just far more changed. I trust my coaches. We have a clear way that we want to play, a clear framework, but I trust them to do their work. I encourage them to do their work.
You delegate more?
I delegate far more. And I'm so much open to criticism and new ideas. You know, when you're a young manager, you have this I know best type attitude. I don't know best. And I listen to people all the time. I try to learn from people all the time. I try to improve all the time. And that's one of the biggest changes to me, that I don't have all the answers. And I'm continuously looking for advice and support from various different people and trying to improve all the time. I think that just comes with experience and time in the game, and some really harsh lessons. I always remember when I was at Coventry. I'd gone from Falkirk and been headhunted by Coventry, and I had a good 3-year period at Falkirk prior to going to Coventry. then a difficult start, and then we started really accelerating. We had a minus 10 points at the start of the season, and we're playing out of 6 fields. But by nearly January, we had overseen that deficit, even though we're in transfer embargo and we're quite a young and inexperienced team, and we're on the verge of the playoffs. And I began to really think I was a really good manager. And as a result of that, Derek, in January, Callum Wilson dislocated his shoulder and didn't play for 3 months. And Leon Clark, our other striker, was sold to Wolves because we needed the finance. And we fell off the cliff. We couldn't win another game. And here was me thinking...
You're heading for the Premier League as a manager?
Yeah, but the reality was, and what I learned there is, the game is always about players. You lose your 2 best strikers. It doesn't matter how well you are or good you are tactically, how good the shape of your team is. You're reliant on players. And it's why the best managers spend the most money, because the best players give you the best results. That's the reality of football. Now, part of the manager's job to squeeze as much out of those players, but it was a really harsh lesson to me, and one of the most important lessons I've ever learned.
I still think, of course, you want as much money as you as you can get, Stephen. But for me, it still comes down to judge of a player. I mean, we'll look at Celtic. There's a number of players I've spent $5 million plus on. Not really worked. But then you could buy somebody, Magnussen at Hearts, for £40,000. He looks a terrific signing. It's still getting the right player, isn't it? It's still judging the right player. But you're right. You know, if you're suddenly losing your top men, any manager's going to suffer a consequence with that, isn't it?
Of course. But the reality was, I was beginning to think it was more about what I was doing rather than the players, and that was the reality, that it was a really harsh lesson and one of my biggest lessons. And that was a number of lessons that I learned along the way, and that's why I've been shaped and moulded. As I said, I went down there with a big ego. I was desperate to be the best, and I've been moulded and shaped by some real setbacks and disappointments.
We all are.
Also, absolutely,
yeah.
And also education. Real education. I had 4 brilliant years at Brentford where I learned so much, and I worked closely with a manager in there that I have the utmost respect for, in Thomas, and he was a manager that had the best possession stats in the Championship in the year that we went up, and then completely adapted and put his ego to the side and became far more pragmatic to get results in the Premier League. And it really changed my thoughts about football, how as a coach you've got to be quite adaptable to the situation.
Brentford's a remarkable club, isn't it? The recruitment is consistently brilliant. Their coaches, Thomas Frank, the ownership model of the club.
Brilliant.
The whole philosophy is outstanding, isn't it, really?
It really is.
And they're comfortable in the Premier League.
Very comfortable. But a lot of that's down to the recruitment of players, but the strategy and processes, and they're always looking to see how they can improve. They're never just satisfied. They're always looking at the next gain, the next thing. So it was a real education for me. But just seeing how the manager worked there, how he adapted, how he parked his ego, how he was prepared to do things to get results, and the importance of certain other areas that probably in my early years as a manager I neglected, like set plays. I didn't realise the importance of them till I went to Brentford and realised that can be 15 points a season for a team, which can sometimes in the Scottish Premier League be the difference between fighting relegation and being a top 6 team. So the margins and how you gain those margins, I learned so much, and I'm very grateful for my time there.
Have you kept in touch with Thomas Frank?
No, I don't speak to Thomas very often. You know, we're both very busy, but I watch from afar, and I'm a huge admirer of Thomas.
You'd be sorry to see his struggles at the moment. It's difficult times for him, isn't it?
Of course, but you've got to remember, in his first 12 games, I think, at Brentford, I don't think he either had one win or no wins in his first 12.
Yeah.
And then went on to potentially be the most successful Brentford manager in its history.
Yeah.
So you understand that at Tottenham. It will take him a bit of time, but if he gets the time, he'll get it right.